Olivia Reed, a poised and self-assured traveler, eagerly boarded her flight knowing her premium cabin ticket guaranteed her comfort. As she strolled down the jet bridge, Olivia felt a surge of excitement for the journey ahead. However, that excitement quickly turned to dismay when Elena Hart, a stern and unyielding flight attendant, intercepted her at the entrance to the premium cabin. "Elena, I'm sorry, but I have a valid ticket for this seat," Olivia explained, her voice steady despite the sudden confrontation. Yet Elena's response was curt and inflexible. "Ma'am, there appears to be an error in your booking. Please move to the economy section immediately," Elena insisted, her tone leaving no room for discussion. Confusion and humiliation washed over Olivia as she realized she was being forcibly removed from her rightful seat. The surrounding passengers watched silently as the scene unfolded, their eyes fixed on Olivia, who maintained her dignity despite the injustice. With a heavy heart, she complied with the directive, feeling the weight of the public embarrassment. Olivia's inner resolve began to form even as she left the premium cabin behind, a resolve that would soon fuel her determination to address this mishandling and challenge the system that had wronged her. Unbeknownst to Olivia Reed, her ordeal was only beginning. Earlier that day, as she had strolled confidently into the airport, her mind was filled with anticipation for a relaxing journey. Dressed in her favorite travel attire and carrying a sense of quiet assurance, Olivia had no inkling of the turbulent encounter that awaited her on board. Once on the aircraft, she found her reserved seat in the premium cabin, a space she had long dreamt of enjoying. The cabin was serene and elegantly appointed, and for a few blissful moments, everything seemed perfect. Olivia settled into her seat, pulling out a book and enjoying the ambient hum of the plane as it prepared for departure. Her experience was one of tranquil solitude and quiet luxury, a stark contrast to the chaos that would soon erupt. Little did she know that, while she sat immersed in her thoughts, a storm was gathering in the form of strict regulations and rigid policies enforced by the flight crew. The calm environment of the premium cabin was about to be shattered by an abrupt and unjust confrontation. Even in that peaceful setting, Olivia's inner strength would be put to the test, setting the stage for the dramatic turn her journey was about to take. As the flight began its ascent, the peaceful ambience in the premium cabin was abruptly disrupted. Elena Hart, the determined flight attendant, returned with a furrowed brow and a sense of urgency. Approaching Olivia once more, Elena began questioning the legitimacy of Olivia's seat assignment. "Ms. Reed, there's been a mistake with your booking," Elena declared, her tone cold and dismissive. "According to our records, you do not belong in this premium section." Olivia's heart sank as she listened to Elena's accusations. She reached into her purse and retrieved her boarding pass, a crisp document that clearly confirmed her reserved seat in the premium cabin. With calm determination, Olivia held it up, inviting Elena to verify the details. But Elena was unmoved by the evidence. "This isn't just about paperwork," Elena insisted. "There's been a clerical error, and for the safety and order of our flight, you must be relocated to the economy section immediately." A murmur ran through the nearby passengers as they observed the escalating dispute. Olivia felt a mix of indignation and disbelief. Here she was, a loyal customer who had planned her travel meticulously, and now she was being singled out and discredited before everyone's eyes. "I understand there might be a system error, but I have every right to sit where my ticket says," Olivia stated firmly, her voice resonating with both authority and disappointment. Elena's eyes narrowed as she scanned the boarding pass again, as if expecting a discrepancy to reveal itself. "The system shows otherwise, Ms. Reed," she replied, her tone bordering on imperious. "I must insist that you comply with our seating regulations." The conflict was now no longer just a matter of seat allocation, it had become a challenge to Olivia's dignity. Olivia's mind raced as she contemplated her next move. Though her heart pounded with a sense of betrayal, she knew that reacting impulsively would only escalate the situation further. Instead, she maintained her composure. "If there's an error, let's resolve it through proper channels," she offered, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Despite her composed demeanor, it was clear that the dispute had already set in motion a chain of events that would force the airline's hand. The passengers watched in silence, sensing that this confrontation was just the beginning of a deeper conflict over fairness and respect in air travel. As the discussion over Olivia Reed's seat assignment continued, the tension in the premium cabin began to rise sharply. Elena Hart, the resolute flight attendant, stepped forward once again with a stern expression. "Ms. Reed, this isn't just a simple clerical error anymore," Elena declared, her voice resonating with authority. "Due to a mistake in the system, you must be relocated immediately, not just to the economy section, but to the back of the plane." Olivia's heart pounded, but she maintained her calm. She had already shown her willingness to resolve the matter amicably, yet Elena's ultimatum left her with no choice but to comply. "I understand your concerns, Elena, but my boarding pass clearly states my reservation in the premium cabin," Olivia countered, her tone respectful yet firm. Despite her measured response, Elena's demeanor hardened. "I'm sorry, Ms. Reed, but the system's data cannot be ignored," Elena replied curtly. "If you refuse to move to the back of the plane, I will have no choice but to call security to enforce the seating regulations." The threat hung in the air, intensifying the eyes of nearby passengers who now watched the confrontation with growing unease. The cabin, once a haven of quiet luxury, was now filled with murmurs and uneasy glances. Olivia felt the weight of public scrutiny, yet she stood her ground. "I don't wish to create any further disruption, but I also believe I have a right to the service I paid for," she said, her voice steady. The challenge was clear. Olivia's insistence on her rights was pitted against Elena's rigid enforcement of the airline's policies. As the standoff continued, it became evident that this was not a simple mix-up but a deep-rooted conflict over authority and respect. With a deep breath, Olivia prepared herself to navigate the storm that was rapidly unfolding around her, determined to secure a fair resolution despite the mounting pressure. After reluctantly relocating to the economy section, Olivia Reed found herself sitting in a cramped seat at the back of the plane. The contrast was stark. Just moments earlier, she had been surrounded by the plush comfort of the premium cabin, and now, a humiliating downgrade left her feeling exposed and determined. As the hum of the engines filled the cabin, Olivia's mind raced through possible ways to address the injustice. She refused to let Elena Hart's cold enforcement go unchallenged. Taking a steadying breath, Olivia discreetly pulled out her smartphone. With practiced precision, she began typing a detailed message to a trusted contact, a consumer rights advocate she had met during previous travels. In her message, Olivia outlined the situation, describing how her valid ticket had been overridden by a supposed system error, leading to her forced demotion. She attached a photo of her boarding pass, taken before the confrontation, ensuring that every detail of the mix-up was documented. Once the message was sent, Olivia switched tactics. She initiated a phone call to the airline's customer service hotline, her voice low but firm as she explained the events that had just unfolded. "Good afternoon, this is Olivia Reed. I'm calling to report an issue with my seat assignment on Flight 502, she began, carefully articulating the sequence of events. She described how Elena Hart had insisted on moving her to the economy section despite her confirmed booking in the premium cabin. "I have documentation to prove my seat was reserved as per my ticket," Olivia added, emphasizing the evidence she possessed. While the customer service representative placed her on hold, Olivia felt a mix of frustration and resolve. Every word she spoke over the phone was a quiet act of defiance, a refusal to accept an unjust treatment that undermined her dignity. The call was brief, yet it confirmed that her complaint was being logged and that the airline would investigate the matter once the flight landed. Even as the plane cruised at high altitude, Olivia's actions echoed her determination to reclaim her rights. She wasn't merely reacting, she was planning her next steps meticulously. The message she sent, the call she made, and every detail she documented would serve as vital evidence if the issue escalated. For Olivia, this was more than just a seating dispute, it was a stand against a system that seemed to favor rigid protocols over individual rights. And as the flight continued, she sat back, resolved to see this matter through, knowing that her proactive approach could spark a change not just for her, but for all passengers who deserve to be treated with respect. As the flight continued on its journey, the atmosphere in the cabin remained tense after Olivia Reed's determined actions. Meanwhile, Elena Hart, the steadfast flight attendant who had enforced the disputed seating, was going about her duties when her phone buzzed unexpectedly. The call was from the airline's executive office, a signal that her earlier actions had not gone unnoticed. Elena hesitated before answering, knowing that a call from upper management could only mean trouble. "This is Elena Hart," she answered in a measured tone. On the other end, a voice introduced himself as Richard Malone, a senior executive with the airline. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge of authority. "Ms. Hart, this is Richard Malone from the executive office," he began. "We have received a formal complaint regarding the handling of a passenger's seating assignment earlier today. I am required to ask you for a detailed report of the incident upon landing." Elena's stomach churned as she listened. The conversation confirmed her worst fears. Her actions during the seating dispute had escalated into a matter of corporate concern. "I understand, Mr. Malone," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I will prepare a full report as soon as we land." Richard continued, his tone suggesting both disappointment and the need for accountability. "Ms. Hart, it is imperative that we maintain the highest standards of service and professionalism. Any deviation from protocol not only affects our passengers but also undermines the reputation of our airline. I trust you understand the gravity of the situation." Elena nodded inwardly, recalling the earlier moments of the altercation. She had followed the airline's policies to the letter, insisting on relocating Olivia despite the mounting discontent. Yet, in enforcing those protocols so rigidly, she had inadvertently caused public embarrassment and a breach in customer service standards. Now, faced with a formal inquiry, she felt the weight of her responsibilities intensify. "I assure you, Mr. Malone, I will include every detail. From the boarding pass verification to the discussions with the passenger and the subsequent threats of security intervention. I will document my actions and explain the reasoning behind them," Elena promised, her tone sincere and apologetic. Richard's voice softened slightly, though the formality of the call remained. "I appreciate your cooperation, Ms. Hart. It is our duty to review every incident thoroughly. Your report will be critical in our internal investigation. We will also review the overall process to ensure that similar incidents are handled with more discretion and empathy in the future." As the call ended, Elena felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had expected consequences, but the realization that her actions would soon be scrutinized by the highest levels of the company added a new layer of pressure. She resumed her duties with a heavy heart, aware that every interaction from that moment on could be a part of the investigation. In the back of her mind, Elena knew that her next steps would determine not only her professional future but also potentially influence the airline's approach to customer service. As the plane cruised toward its destination, she began mentally preparing the detailed report she would submit, determined to explain her actions comprehensively while learning from the incident. As the flight continued on its course, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted subtly from mere discomfort to palpable tension. Olivia Reed, despite her earlier ordeal, maintained an air of quiet dignity. Seated in the main cabin, she continued to exude calm resolve, her eyes focused on the horizon outside the window. Every time she glanced around, it was as if her serene demeanor silently defied the injustice she had experienced. Passengers around her exchanged uncertain looks, some sympathetic, others wary, as if waiting for the next development. Meanwhile, Elena Hart, the flight attendant who had enforced the disputed seating change, began to feel the weight of the situation in a way she hadn't anticipated. Initially, she had believed that strictly following protocol would ensure a smooth operation on board. But as the minutes ticked by and the murmurs of discontent grew louder, Elena started to realize that her actions had ignited a spark of resistance that challenged not only her authority but also the power dynamics between staff and passengers. Every so often, Elena caught sight of Olivia's composed expression, and it unsettled her. The calm in Olivia's eyes spoke of a strength and determination that contrasted sharply with the rigid enforcement Elena had tried to impose. It was as if Olivia's quiet defiance exposed a deeper truth, that the system, in its inflexibility, was failing to honor the dignity of its customers. Elena's earlier confidence began to waver. In her mind, she replayed the encounter, questioning whether the strict adherence to a flawed policy was truly worth the personal cost of alienating a loyal traveler. As the flight advanced, the cabin's ambience became charged with an undercurrent of unrest. Passengers whispered among themselves, some openly questioning the validity of the seating decision, while others expressed concern over the manner in which the situation had been handled. In one corner, a small group discussed the incident as though it were a microcosm of a larger systemic problem within the airline. Their voices, though hushed, carried an unmistakable tone of protest and resolve. Elena moved about the cabin with a growing sense of unease, her steps measured as she tried to continue her duties. However, every interaction felt more scrutinized. The eyes of both passengers and fellow crew members followed her, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disapproval. At one point, while refilling a beverage cart, she overheard a conversation that hinted at mounting dissatisfaction with the airline's customer service approach. The realization hit her hard: what had started as a routine enforcement of policy had escalated into a confrontation with far-reaching implications. Olivia, on the other hand, remained unruffled. She continued to document her experience discreetly, occasionally jotting down notes on her phone, preparing to use her account as evidence if necessary. Her measured approach not only highlighted her personal resilience but also underscored a broader call for fairness and accountability in air travel. By the time the flight began its descent, the silent tension had evolved into a quiet standoff. The cabin was charged with unspoken questions. Would the airline's higher-ups acknowledge the mishandling? Could a single passenger's dignified response catalyze change? For Elena, the answer was slowly coming into focus. The power dynamics at play were no longer just about enforcing rules, they were about recognizing and respecting the rights and dignity of every individual on board. In that charged atmosphere, as the plane prepared to land, both Olivia Reed and Elena Hart stood at a crossroads. Olivia's composed determination and Elena's dawning realization signaled that the confrontation was far from over, it was merely entering its next, more consequential phase. As the plane began its descent toward the terminal, the once tense atmosphere inside had transformed into an anticipatory quiet. Every passenger seemed to hold their breath, aware that the incident had escalated far beyond a simple seating dispute. Olivia Reed, seated in the main cabin after her forced relocation, maintained her calm, yet every detail of the unfolding drama was seared into her memory. She watched intently as the cabin crew prepared for landing, aware that her complaint had set in motion an investigation that might redefine the airline's approach to customer service. Shortly after the aircraft touched down, the cabin doors opened and a team of stern-faced security officers began to board. Their presence was immediately palpable, and whispers swept through the cabin as passengers exchanged curious and concerned glances. Officer Benjamin Cole, a seasoned member of the security team, led the group as he made his way directly toward Elena Hart, the flight attendant who had enforced the controversial seating change. Elena's composure wavered as she met Officer Cole's steady gaze. The officer's tone was formal as he addressed her, "Miss Hart, we need to discuss the incident that occurred during the flight. Please accompany us for further questioning." The words were delivered with an unmistakable finality that left no room for deflection. Elena's colleagues, who had once followed her lead without question, now watched silently, their expressions a mix of shock and apprehension. For Olivia, this moment represented both a vindication of her stand and a critical turning point. She felt a surge of resolve knowing that the actions taken by Elena were now under formal review. Her mind recalled every word exchanged, every threat made, and the documentation she had quietly gathered throughout the ordeal. This was not just about her, it was about holding the airline accountable for policies that disregarded passenger dignity. Once escorted to the back of the aircraft, Elena was handed a thick folder by Officer Cole. Inside, the preliminary report outlined a detailed account of the events, from the initial confrontation over her seating assignment to the subsequent escalation involving threats of security intervention. The report was unequivocal in its language, noting that the incident had not only violated internal protocols but had also resulted in significant customer distress and public embarrassment. Elena's hands trembled as she skimmed through the report. The realization that her actions had triggered an investigation into her conduct weighed heavily on her. She recalled the pressure of enforcing a policy that, in hindsight, had been applied with excessive rigidity. The report made clear that her adherence to the rules, while intended to maintain order, had instead compromised the service and respect owed to passengers. Elena knew that this investigation could lead to serious repercussions, including suspension, and possibly a permanent mark on her career. Meanwhile, in the main cabin, Olivia observed the scene with a measured detachment. She felt a bittersweet mix of sympathy and resolve. While part of her empathized with the human cost of enforcing such strict protocols, she also recognized that this moment marked the beginning of necessary change. Olivia's quiet documentation, notes, photographs of her boarding pass, and timestamps of the incident, would serve as critical evidence as the investigation unfolded. As more security officers stepped forward, they began gathering statements from passengers. Several individuals who had witnessed the confrontation spoke up, corroborating Olivia's account of the events. Their testimonies painted a picture of an enforcement process that was both abrupt and lacking in the empathy one would expect from a respected airline. The internal affairs team, already alerted by the executive office following Olivia's initial complaint, would soon have a wealth of evidence to scrutinize. Back in the crew area, Elena was asked to provide a detailed explanation of her actions. The tone of the inquiry was stern but methodical, aimed at understanding whether the rigid enforcement of the seating policy was an isolated misjudgment or part of a broader systemic issue within the airline. Elena attempted to explain her rationale, pointing to what she believed were inconsistencies in the booking system, but her voice faltered under the weight of the mounting evidence against her. By the time the aircraft finally parked at the gate, the investigation was well underway. Security personnel, along with representatives from the airline's Internal Affairs Division, began drafting an official incident report. The atmosphere was heavy with the realization that the day's events would soon ripple through the higher echelons of management, potentially leading to sweeping policy revisions and a re-evaluation of crew training procedures. For Olivia Reed, the culmination of this incident was not just a personal victory, but a call for reform. As she disembarked, she exchanged knowing looks with several fellow passengers who had also suffered from similar rigid enforcement in the past. Their silent camaraderie spoke volumes, a collective hope that the investigation would bring about a much-needed change, ensuring that every future journey would be marked by respect, empathy, and fairness. In the days following the investigation initiated upon landing, the atmosphere within the airline grew increasingly charged with anticipation. The preliminary incident report had already made its way to senior management, setting off a chain of events that would forever alter the course of service protocols. For Elena Hart, the once steadfast flight attendant, the coming days were a blur of uncertainty and anxiety. Her actions during the flight had sparked not only an internal inquiry but also public outcry, forcing her into the spotlight as management sought to understand every facet of the confrontation. Shortly after the flight, Elena was summoned to a meeting with the airline's internal affairs team. The room was stark and clinical, its cold ambience underscoring the gravity of the situation. Sitting across from the panel were representatives of the airline's executive office, their expressions stern as they prepared to question her. Among them was Richard Malone, the senior executive who had earlier spoken with her over the phone. His presence was both a reminder of the serious breach of protocol and a symbol of the accountability the airline now demanded. "Ms. Hart," Richard began, his tone measured yet resolute, "we have reviewed the preliminary report regarding the incident on Flight 502. Your actions have raised serious concerns about the enforcement of our seating policies and the treatment of our passengers. Please explain your conduct during that flight. Elena's voice wavered slightly as she recounted the events. She detailed how she had relied on the system's data and followed standard procedures, believing that her actions were in line with the airline's protocols. Yet as she spoke, it became clear that her explanation did little to mitigate the criticism. The panel questioned the excessive rigidity with which she enforced the seating change, noting that her approach had escalated the situation unnecessarily and caused undue distress to a loyal customer. Witness statements, compiled from interviews with passengers, painted a contrasting picture. Olivia Reed, the passenger at the heart of the dispute, had maintained an admirable composure throughout the ordeal, even as she calmly documented every detail. Other passengers recounted how Elena's tone was unyielding and how her threats of calling security contributed to an atmosphere of intimidation. These testimonies left little doubt that Elena had overstepped the bounds of acceptable customer service. After several hours of intense questioning, the panel reached its conclusion. Elena was informed that, due to her mishandling of the situation, she would face disciplinary action. The decision was not taken lightly. It signified the airline's commitment to upholding high standards of respect and professionalism. Elena was suspended pending further review, a measure that sent ripples through the ranks of the cabin crew. Her suspension was accompanied by a directive for mandatory retraining, emphasizing sensitivity, empathy, and the importance of balanced enforcement of policy. As news of the disciplinary action spread, it coincided with a turning point for Olivia Reed. Her calculated response during the flight, and her insistence on asserting her rights through proper channels, had not only safeguarded her dignity but also catalyzed a broader dialogue within the airline. In the days that followed, Olivia was approached by several passengers and consumer rights advocates who had been inspired by her calm yet assertive stance. Her detailed account of the incident, which included meticulously documented evidence and witness testimonies, became the cornerstone of a growing movement demanding accountability and reform. In response, the airline's board convened an emergency session to review their policies on customer treatment and conflict resolution. Olivia's actions had brought to light a systemic issue, the need for a more humane and balanced approach to enforcing protocols. The board, acknowledging the validity of the passenger complaints, approved sweeping changes. Among the reforms were the implementation of mandatory bias and sensitivity training for all flight attendants, a revision of seating protocols to allow for better dispute resolution, and the establishment of a dedicated customer relations team tasked with addressing grievances swiftly and fairly. The changes did not stop there. The board also initiated a review of all recent incidents of similar nature, determined to ensure that no passenger would have to endure what Olivia had experienced. While Elena Hart's disciplinary action served as an immediate consequence for her role in the incident, it also became a catalyst for systemic change. The airline committed to transparency and accountability, signaling to its customers that their voices would no longer be ignored. For Olivia Reed, this outcome was both a personal vindication and a triumph for all passengers who had felt marginalized by impersonal corporate policies. Her determination to stand up against rigid enforcement not only led to tangible improvements within the airline but also set a precedent for how such conflicts should be handled in the future. The ripple effect of her actions promised a new era of service that balanced strict adherence to policy with genuine respect for every individual on board. Thus, while Elena Hart faced the consequences of her actions, Olivia Reed emerged as a champion for reform, her quiet strength and unwavering commitment to fairness reshaping the airline's culture for the better. In the weeks that followed the incident, the impact of Olivia Reed's courageous stand resonated throughout the airline. With Elena Hart facing disciplinary measures and a formal investigation completed, the airline's leadership took decisive steps to restore trust and improve customer service. The board, led by Senior Executive Richard Malone, announced sweeping reforms aimed at preventing future conflicts and ensuring fair treatment for all passengers. The new policies included mandatory bias and sensitivity training for all crew members, emphasizing empathy and effective communication. The revised seating protocols were designed to allow for a more nuanced approach to resolving booking discrepancies, ensuring that no customer would be unjustly displaced again. A dedicated customer relations team was established, tasked with addressing complaints promptly and transparently, thereby bridging the gap between passengers and management. For Olivia Reed, the aftermath was bittersweet. While she had endured a challenging ordeal, her composed resistance had sparked a vital change within the airline. Her detailed account of the incident and the evidence she provided became a model for future grievance handling, setting a precedent that empowered other passengers to speak up when faced with injustice. Passengers and advocacy groups praised the airline's commitment to reform, noting that the changes not only addressed the immediate issues but also paved the way for a more respectful and inclusive travel experience. The transformation was evident. A once rigid system had evolved into one that valued individual dignity and fairness. In the end, Olivia's resolve had not only vindicated her own experience but had also ushered in a new era of accountability and customer care within the industry.